Hello. So, today I am going to be talking about this book, The Magicians by Lev Grossman. It is the first book, I believe, in a trilogy. Yes, it is a trilogy. And the type of book that it is a novel, a contemporary fantasy, parallel universes in fiction, fantasy fiction, and high fantasy. So it is contemporary fantasy, which means that it takes place in our modern day and age, but it has elements that are fantastical or something that leads to some sort of magic system. You also see that with the other variations of fantasy, especially high fantasy. And for anyone that doesn't know, like I didn't know and I had to look it up, high fantasy is generally seen as more of an epic story. It is a much bigger kind of magic system. It's more along the lines of, say, like Lord of the Rings, whereas Harry Potter would be considered a bit more low fantasy just because it takes place more in our everyday world. At least that's from how I understand it. And this book may be my most controversial opinion so far. And I've just gathered that from some of the people I've already talked to about my thoughts on this book since I finished it. I rated this book a 1 star out of 5, and there is a reason for that. I'll get into it. I'm going to try to keep this review as positive as I can for a book that I just did not like. So, what this book is about. The book follows a character named Quentin. He is just finishing up high school at the beginning of the book, and he is getting ready to go to a university. He has this obsession with a children's book within the book and the world Filori. I think that's how you say it. But this obsession that he has kind of carries on throughout the entirety of the book and really comes into play in the last few chapters. But as Quentin is going through and getting ready to go to university, he is transported to a mysterious magical college named Brakebills. And the rest of the book follows his trials and tribulations as he progresses through his college career and into the following years after he graduates. So, that is everything I can really say about the book without spoiling anything. And the only issue here with trying to explain what I liked versus what I didn't is that there is one thing that I liked in this book, and I could talk about the things that I didn't like for hours. But we're going to narrow it down to just 5 things. I'm going to talk about them and end with the one thing that I did like. So, when we get into this book, the first thing that really struck me, because I sat with this for a few days trying to digest and trying to find more things that I liked about it, but I kept coming back to just the way that this book was written. And maybe I'm picky, but this book reads more like a fan fiction of Harry Potter and the Chronicles of Narnia. Someone smushed them together and set it in the United States. And that's just how it comes across to me. A lot of what happens at the magical college, Brakebills, seems to be pulled directly from Harry Potter. They even talk about the people at Brakebills speaking with a more stereotypical British accent a couple of times. And then the magical world of Filori is a very thinly veiled version of Narnia. I would be giving away so many spoilers if I went into that at all, but it is the most thin veil I've ever seen in a book. It looks like someone just took the world of Narnia, gave it a different name, and tried to pass it off as their own. So, was not a fan of that, but I know this book is supposed to be inspired by those two, but it seems more like the author just took those ideas, renamed them, and tried to pass them off as his own. The next thing that really stood out to me about the writing itself is the pacing of this book. And when I say that, I mean you can start one chapter in the first year of Quentin going to college, and by the end of the chapter, he's in like his third year of the college. And it's not like they're just flashing forward and they're going to go back and actually show you what happened in those between years. No, you're just all of a sudden in the third year and you just keep going from there. And it was just a really jarring way to read it. It feels more like someone is speaking at you and giving you a summary of a much better book that they read, probably Harry Potter and Chronicles of Narnia. But you don't get to actually sit inside the world and live in the world and really feel what the characters are going through. You're just being told everything, step by step, what's happening. And there's not a chance to sit and really just soak any of it in. It was just a really odd way to write it. The next thing, when I'm sitting here trying to think of anything positive about this book, but I can only think of the things I did not like, there isn't a single likable character in this book. And that's fine. If you want to have anti-heroes in a book, there's nothing wrong with that. I generally like anti-heroes a lot more than like people that are just positive sunshine and rainbows all the time. But in this case, when every single character is an anti-hero and you just can't connect with them at all and they keep making stupid decisions, that's when I have an issue. The only character that may have been likable is Alice, but that doesn't even really come into play until the last couple of chapters, and then the book's done. So the last thing that I could think of just off the top of my head for things that I wasn't a fan of for this book, if you are able to slog your way through it, you will be presented with various battle scenes. The only problem with these are that they are all boring except one. And one of them is well written, and it's the last one, so you really have to hold out to the end. And I know that all sounds really negative and really harsh probably on this book. I have very strong opinions about this book. I'm trying to keep this as positive as possible. So with all of that being said, I'll talk about the one thing that I actually did like about this book, and that would be the magic system that's presented in this, which, while this is the only thing that seemed to truly be inspired by Harry Potter, but then made into the author's own kind of idea. So the magic system in this book is a hard magic system, which I love. I love hard magic systems because it means that there are rules. There is a very specific way that the magic works. There are consequences for using the magic, and you don't just know the magic right off the bat. You get to watch the characters learn it, and they aren't good right away. Even though Quentin and a couple other characters are said to be like prodigies in the magic system, you still see them fail over and over and over again. And even by the end of the book, they really haven't mastered anything yet, which that I appreciated. I hate when characters are able to just jump into a new magic system and then everything works out for them in the end. Um, but the magic system that's developed in this is really interesting, and it's not something I've seen in any other books. It all has to do with language and really adapting your language and the movement that you like. There's some kind of hand movement that you do each time you cast a spell, and you adapt that to whatever the specific situation is. And you actually see the characters sit down and study and research and learn all of the different little details for each spell, each system that they want to do. So that, if you are a magic system junkie kind of like I am, you will appreciate that in this book. But if you are a reader like I am, then that may be the only thing you appreciate about this book. And I know that this was a very negative book review. Hopefully, next time it will be one that I really like. So, until then, right.